He had lived in that apartment for nearly 6 years, a long, narrow place on the 7th floor of an aging concrete building where the hallways always smelled faintly of dust and warm metal, and where the lights above the entrance door flickered in the same slow rhythm that they had when he first moved in, as if time in that place had simply forgotten how to progress properly. His unit was at the far end, just past a bend in the corridor where the walls grew tighter and the overhead lights dimmed inexplicably, even though maintenance had replaced the bulbs countless times, never understanding why no bulb ever stayed bright for long. It was in that half-lit final stretch, that thin, windowless vein of the building where the ceiling pressed lower and the air became strangely muffled, that he began to notice the presence. It didn't announce itself. There were no sounds, no smells, no doors creaking where they shouldn't, nothing that could be called unusual in the obvious sense, but rather a change in atmosphere so gradual and so subtle that at first he thought it was only fatigue, or the slow accumulation of loneliness pressing at the edges of his perception. It was only after several nights, returning late from work, walking down the same stretch of hallway with that same grocery bag in hand and the keys already in his fingers, that he began to feel that he was no longer alone in that space, even though nothing ever moved, even though no door was open, even though no other tenant ever walked past. The realization arrived slowly, like a dampness spreading under wallpaper, unnoticed until it touches skin. Someone was standing at the very end of the hallway. At first it was nothing more than a suggestion, a slight difference in the darkness, a patch of shadow darker than the rest, positioned too perfectly to be a coincidence, and he would squint, blink, hold his breath, but by the time he reached his door, the shape would be gone, and when he turned the key, stepped inside, and closed himself off from the corridor, he would convince himself that it was a trick of light, that the hallway's gloom played games with tired eyes. But each night, the impression grew more solid. Not closer. Not more detailed. Just more certain. It was always the same position, still, motionless, at the far end, just at the point where the hallway turned, standing without movement, without form, like a figure carved from shadow rather than flesh, not approaching, not retreating, simply waiting. And what disturbed him most was that the rest of the hallway seemed to adjust around it. The lights grew dimmer when the figure was present, the silence thickened, the air cooled. It was as if the building itself responded to the presence, as if the walls understood that someone, or something, was there, and in doing so, fell quiet. He never approached it. He never tested the distance. He told himself there was no reason to fear it, that the hallway had always been strange, that buildings this old carried with them the memory of past tenants, of lives worn into the structure like handprints in clay, but beneath that rationalization lived a tightening thread of dread, the kind that doesn't emerge from danger, but from certainty, the certainty that what you see is real, and that its very realness means you are not imagining anything at all. One night, while locking the door behind him, he glanced back down the hallway and saw that the figure remained, standing exactly where it always stood, not altered, not advanced, not gone. And though it had never spoken, never moved, never done anything at all, he knew with a terrible clarity that it was waiting for something, something only he could provide. He stopped turning on the hallway light when returning home, not because it changed what he saw, but because the dimness somehow felt more honest than the weak yellow fluorescence that always flickered anyway, revealing only what it wanted and veiling the rest in a way that no longer comforted him. The figure, or rather, the place where the figure stood, became part of his routine, a static point in the map of his nights, and though he never acknowledged it directly, never walked toward it or tested the limits of its presence, it became impossible to convince himself that it wasn't watching him, not with eyes, perhaps, but with a kind of quiet expectation that saturated the far end of the corridor with a tension so precise that it vibrated in the base of his spine even after the door had closed behind him.